Alright, today I'm going to make a peppermint cream pie, which is similar to how you would make a coconut cream pie or any other basic cream pie, only using peppermint candy canes to flavor the milk. So to start, I'm going to make a graham cracker crust using chocolate graham crackers. Normally I would melt chocolate and cover the lining of the pie tin with the melted chocolate and then freeze it so that I can pour the cream into it. But I'm going to try with a chocolate flavored graham cracker crust just for ease of use. It's a little harder to cut through the solid chocolate if you do a chocolate base for the pie. So for this we need, I'm going to do half a recipe from what I have, so this should make 2 9-inch pie tins, but because I have a 9.5 I need a little bit more for wheat for one, so I'm going to do a double recipe. So for this I need 8 ounces of graham crackers, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a food processor for this. You can crush these up in yourself with your hands or with anything you have available and mix together manually, or you can blend them to get more crumbs like I'm going to do. For this I try to get it into the quarters that they break into, just so that they'll catch on the blade and actually blend. For this I'm going to add the sugar straight in, so it's 4 ounces of sugar. And I'm just going to lift this on here because now that I've got the blade set, I don't want to pop it out. Good mixture. Now right now I'm melting 4 ounces of butter on the stove. It's almost ready. See if I can get the rest of it to melt while I cool it down a little bit. If you just have a little bit like this, a little piece, you can kind of swirl it around. The heat of the butter will melt it down. You don't have to keep it on the stove. Especially if you're going to cool it down to try to mix it into something like this. It's useful to pull it off and let it rest. Pull the top off. Pour it in. And turn this back on. You can see I still got a little steam coming off from that butter. You want a good consistency like this, so you can put it in and then press it into shape. Now if you have a 9-inch pie tin, this will do 2 of them. I'll probably just get the one from this recipe because I have a 9.5. And this isn't as much like working like with a dough. It's going to be a lot more delicate. So kind of just get it into place where you can push down to kind of press it without it collapsing if you want to. Just a nice even coating all the way around. And then this will go in the oven for 10 minutes at 350. And this next part you can do while the pie crust is in the oven because it'll take a little bit of time. So because we're not using like a peppermint flavoring and coloring, using actual candy canes, we're going to need to essentially dissolve the candy canes in the milk that we're going to use. So to make a basic cream pie filling, you're going to need milk. Again, I recommend whole milk for this just because it'll give you a richer flavor. This takes a pint. It's about 16 ounces. You can just measure it out into the pot. It's the same pot that I melted the butter into. It's fine. We add butter to the recipe later, so having a little bit of butter in it right now is not going to hurt it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 candy canes, break them up, stick them in here, put it on the stove on low, and then let it just steep for a while until these dissolve. And when that's ready, we'll go from there. So once your pie tin has cooled down from the oven and everything is dissolved in your milk, you can add in 2 ounces of sugar to the milk and stir it until it combines and it dissolves as well. This next part you want to make sure you do right when you're ready to do all the steps, because when you add sugar to eggs, you can end up with them coagulating or thickening before you want them to. So for this next part, we need 2 egg yolks, a bowl. And then 1 whole egg. We're going to need 2 ounces of sugar. Now at this point, because you already have 2 ounces of sugar with the milk and you have the candy canes melted, you're probably safe with 1.5 ounces of sugar for this part rather than the full 2. And then you're going to need 1.25 ounces of cornstarch. You're going to whisk this together until it's well combined. You want this to be as smooth as you can get it. The cornstarch and the egg is going to thicken this for us. And any clumps you have left in this is going to possibly result in clumps in the finished pie filling. That is good. Now, the next part is to actually temper in the milk mixture, but before we do that, I'm going to measure out some butter because we'll need it later and we won't have a ton of time between steps going forward because this will thicken it pretty quick once we get it up to a boil. So we're going to need an ounce of butter. Not quite as much as we need. It's about 1.5 ounces. Actually, put that down, tear it. Okay, that'll do. What I like to do is cube this so that I have smaller bits. This butter we're going to toss into the mixture and mix in right at the end after it's already begun thickening, so it is helpful to have pieces that can melt faster in the final product. I'll leave that there. We don't need to measure anything else by weight. Okay. So the next step is going to be to temper our mixture into this. Now the easiest way to hold this in place, because you've got to hold the pot with one hand and whisk with the other. You take a kitchen towel and make a nest, I guess a donut out of it, and stick your and get a whisking motion while it stays in place and it won't move around as much. So that'll let you grab this mixture. You can see it's nice and pink from the candy canes. You can slowly mix in. Now I'm keeping the bottom of this over so that way, because you want to pour this slowly to slowly raise the temperature of the eggs as you mix it in, and rather than dumping it in all at once. So if you're pouring it too slowly and it drips down the side, you want the bottom of your pan to be over what you're working in so you don't lose any of it. But inevitably I lost some of it. Okay, so we are going to put this back over top the stove. Just clean up my mess a little bit. So this is going to go back in the pot. And go back on the stove, and what we're going to do is, while whisking it, raise the temperature to a boil. It'll start to thicken and we're going to pull it off at that point. So we've got it back on the stove, got the heat going. Now this step, you do, some recipes when they say constantly stir, you don't necessarily have to. For this you do. As soon as the mixture reaches a certain temperature, the egg and cornstarch is going to thicken. And you need to have it whisked and pulled off about at that point. At that point you'll also see this foam on the top will reincorporate. So as you're watching you can kind of see where it's at. At this point I can already feel it starting to thicken a little bit. It's getting pretty close. So I lost what's on the top, the extra is already thickening. At this point, you pull it up off the heat, finish, and pull it away. You can see it's pretty thick. This is what we're adding the butter to. So you just take the butter that we cut up, put it in, and start whisking it in. You just whisk this in until it's melted and combined. And the butter adds a little bit of richness to it, just like the whole milk that we use, but it also, as it, if you put it in the fridge to cool, will also help it keep its shape. You see, we've got everything combined. It's thickening up. What we're going to do is grab our pie tin, which I'm going to stick on the back, which is the burner we weren't using. And I'm going to grab these and just pull it out into the pie. So this is okay. This filling amount makes a 9-inch pie tin, which will not fill this up entirely, but that's fine because I'm going to be topping it with whipped cream anyway. So once you have it in here, just kind of want to push it out a little bit so it's flat and relatively even. Doesn't need to be perfect. This is pretty good. We'll just stick this in the fridge. Now normally for this sort of pie, while it's cooling, you would sprinkle it with sugar and then cover it right along the top while it's cooling so that it doesn't develop a film if you're going to serve it like fresh with the top. Since I'm going to be putting a whipped cream topping on top, it's not as important to do that. The whipped cream will, with contact with the top, if a film forms, help to kind of constitute that into less of a film. And while the pie is cooling and setting up in the fridge, I'm going to work on some crushed candy canes for the topping. So the topping will be a whipped cream topping sprinkled with crushed up candy canes, which makes a very nice visually appealing presentation. You can do one, you can do two. I usually do two and then have some left over when I do these pies, just to make sure that I have enough. It's hard to get an even consistency grinding these up, so it's nice to have a little bit extra, and that way you can kind of be picky about which parts of the crushed up candy cane you're using. I've got a mortar and pestle here. Sometimes I'll just put these in a baggie, hit them with a mallet, but you can also put them in here. Now the candy canes are really hard, so you don't want to like hit them so much as you want to press them into the mortar and pestle, and that'll give you some decent breaks. Now I'm covering my hand like this as I do it, so I don't have them pop out as I try to crush them. These larger pieces are nice for having chunks on the top. This kind of more fine ground stuff is nice for, that'll dissolve into the whipped cream topping and give you more of a coloration effect. And that'll be enough for one pie. Yeah, we'll need probably about a half to 2/3 of that. Now for whipping the whipped cream, I typically like to do this obviously by scratch. One thing to note is if you are whipping cream by hand, it does help to have a metal bowl. And it helps if that metal bowl is cold. So we'll typically stick it in the fridge. That way it helps keep the cream cold while you're whipping it. You don't need as much as you think when you're doing this. For this, I probably need about half. This is 1 pint. Probably need about half of this bottle to be enough for that pie. And you add sugar to this, but what I find is it's easier to get it going if you add the sugar in later than if you do it at the beginning. So right about this point where you're starting to get some aeration to it is where I'll usually add in some sugar. With the candy cane stuff on top, I pretty much just add about a tablespoon or two. As we go further along, you can always taste it to see if it is sweet enough. And I would normally do this with an electric beater, but I do want to just go over, doing it by hand. One thing you'll notice is your arm will get very tired if you're not used to doing this. So you're starting to see that it's like leaving a trail as you go. That lets you know that you're getting pretty close. What I may actually do, so that the heat of my hand does not keep heating the bowl, I may just stick it down. You want to get to this point where you can see that you can leave kind of hills with it, and it sticks to the whisk. Now that it's cooled down, take our whipped cream. Just spread it out evenly. And sprinkle it with our crushed candy canes. There you have it. You just slice and serve like any other pie.